We embed ourselves in local ecosystems, the local business communities across the United States, so we could work hand in hand with U.S. manufacturers to help them to increase their exports. And we work on a day-to-day basis in tandem with my counterparts at U.S. embassies and consulates around the world. So we serve in a business advisory role, which makes us a unique federal government agency. We don't regulate companies. We don't impose fines on companies. We really work hand in hand to help companies to define and execute their export strategies.
Just a quick reminder to check us out and follow us on LinkedIn so you're up to date on all our episode releases. Hey, it's Ari. Welcome to another episode of the Made in America podcast. I'm really excited to have Melissa Grosso, Director of the U.S. Commercial Service, on today. Melissa, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks, Ari. Appreciate you having me.
Well, listen, Melissa, it's the Made in America podcast, so we always start off with the same two questions. What do you make and why do you make it?
Well, at the U.S. Commercial Service, we create exports. And exports are important to the U.S. economy. They help U.S. companies to grow their businesses, and it's helping the U.S. economy to grow. So to put it another way, increased U.S. exports means increased U.S. jobs.
There we go. Increased U.S. jobs. I think we like that.
Yes.
So let's just dig into a little bit. I don't know how many people listening have had experience with the U.S. Commercial Service and what the export stuff looks like. So why don't we just sort of start with that? Maybe go really big picture, like, what does this department look like? How is it structured? How many people are in Connecticut? Do other states have this? Kind of give us the lay of the land.
Sure, absolutely. So we are part of the U.S. Department of Commerce, which is a huge federal government agency with a lot of different agencies underneath it. I am part of the International Trade Administration, and under that is the U.S. Commercial Service. So we are the lead trade promotion agency for the U.S. federal government. We have offices like mine in Connecticut. We have 3 people in Connecticut. There are offices like mine all across the U.S. We have 106 offices across the U.S. And we have offices at U.S. embassies and consulates in 70-plus countries. So we have a very, very wide footprint across the globe.
And sort of the context of that is we put people in every state and people in other countries to develop export relationships. What's kind of the...
Yep, absolutely. We embed ourselves in local ecosystems, the local business communities across the United States, so we could work hand in hand with U.S. manufacturers to help them to increase their exports. And we work on a day-to-day basis in tandem with my counterparts at U.S. embassies and consulates around the world. So we serve in a business advisory role, which makes us a unique federal government agency. We don't regulate companies. We don't impose fines on companies. We really work hand in hand to help companies to define and execute their export strategies. And we can dig into some examples of that, I feel like, later on.
I'm actually looking forward to that. And I actually want to dig into sort of the whole process, and kind of how it works. But before I do that, I just want to talk a little bit about your background.
Sure.
I mean, you're a Connecticut girl, born and raised.
I am a Waterbury girl, born and raised. Live in New Haven now, but I like to say that I'm a daughter of manufacturing. My father graduated from Kaner Tech in Waterbury and worked as a tool and die maker at a manufacturing company in Waterbury for 40 some odd years before he retired. And then picked up another part-time job as a tool and die maker afterwards in Watertown. And now he's fully retired.
People listening will be familiar with tool and die makers that just seem to always want to keep on going, really develop that passion.
Yes.
Was there some connection between your kind of growing up and understanding manufacturing, kind of what you're doing today? Was it just sort of happenstance? Like, how did you get from growing up in Waterbury to where you are today?
It's a good question. It's one of those instances where I like to say the universe sometimes surprises and delights you. Mm-hmm. Definitely remember growing up and walking through my father's manufacturing company, and I can remember, the smell of the equipment and whatnot, and looking at it through the lens of a young kid. Went to Southern Connecticut State University, was an English and political science major. The way I got to commerce is I was working for the political science department at Southern. A professor of mine knew my first boss at Commerce, who introduced me and started a co-op. So I was doing an MBA and working part-time at Commerce. And 20 years later, I'm still there. So learned a lot about business, really on the ground, working with Connecticut's manufacturing companies.
So, I mean, you're working in commerce, now you sort of have this role. Talk to us about how do you engage with the businesses you're trying to help? I mean, I guess maybe there's probably a pre and post COVID answer to this question potentially, but let's just see where it goes. How do you, we know about 4,000 manufacturers in Connecticut. You said there's 3 people in the office. So, that's about 1,300 manufacturers per person. So how does that work?
Great question. We try to be as proactive as possible, but given our staffing numbers, sometimes we end up being a little bit reactive in answering calls from clients. And the questions that companies come to us, there's a pretty broad range. Some companies come to us with a very, very specific request, such as I'm bidding on a procurement in Germany, and I have competitors from all over the world. What can you do to help me win this procurement? And we have an advocacy service that can help that company get a leg up against foreign competitors. It might be a company contacting us saying, I'm doing business in the UK, I'd like to do more business in Europe, and I need help finding local partners who can be our on-the-ground sales team in Europe. And we would then work with our team in Europe to help that company find a local partner. It might be a company calls us and says, hey, there's this export document. I'm not sure how to fill it out. I'm not sure what it is, but my customer in Korea is asking for it. Can you walk me through what that process is? All the way to the other end of the spectrum where we have companies who say, hey, I want to start exporting, but I don't know where to start. Can you help? And we can help walk them down that path. So it's a pretty broad spectrum of ways that we help companies. And again, we try to be as proactive as possible. Our office and our offices across the country put on a ton of export-related programs for manufacturers and service providers. We put on trade missions where we are bringing companies to buyers, to representatives and partners overseas to help them to drum up more business internationally. So again, it's a pretty broad range of ways that we help companies.
Yeah, that is a broad range for a number of people. So what percentage of your time are you guys, would you say, educating people on how to do exporting versus sort of the more hand-to-hand combat of helping specific companies execute on strategy?
Well, I guess the way I think about it is it's all education. So even for companies who have successfully done business, say, in Europe, if they then want to expand to Asia Pacific or start selling into Latin America, it's a different way of doing business. And that's where our people on the ground really help. And I can't brag enough about our people internationally. They really are experts, not just in their industry sectors, but in doing business in that country. And I'll give you a specific example,
I was going to say,
if you don't mind.
I not only do I not mind, I was exactly where I was going. Sure. Let's dig in. Yeah.
I deal better in sort of the tangible world, Ari, so thank you for that. So let's see. Recently, I cover, in terms of industry sectors, you're going to hear me talk a lot about aerospace defense. I've covered aerospace defense for almost my entire tenure, so have a love of those companies here in the state, and we certainly have a lot of supply chain companies, and also energy sector companies I've recently started working with. So I was working with a company in the energy sector who is looking at hiring a partner in Chile.
So just real quickly for
Sure.
energy sector, oil and gas type of energy? Like when you say energy, give me an idea of what we're talking about.
So as an organization, the U.S. Commercial Service defines energy pretty broad brush. It could be oil and gas, it could be renewables, it could be hydrogen fuel cells. Okay. So in this case, as you know, Connecticut has a lot of hydrogen companies, so it was in that realm.
Okay.
So we were working with our energy specialist at the out of the U.S. Embassy in Santiago, and the company came to us and said, "Hey, we're looking to possibly do business with this Chilean company. Can you give us any background? What's going on in the industry sector?" So our energy specialist in Santiago was able to start with a macroeconomic overview of, hey, this is what's going on in the country. We've got some political changes. This is what's going on with the Ministry of Energy. This is how the Chileans are looking at the fuel cell sector, the renewable sector. These are some of the competitors who are coming in from other countries. And then, oh, by the way, yes, I do happen to know the company that you're looking to do business with, and here's a little bit of background on them. And by the way, I know the company president quite well, and here's some information that you may want to know about the company. So to be able to drill down to that level without that assistance and that advisement, it's sometimes hard for companies to get down to that nuanced level of information. And we can do that with literally a conference call.
And so that was just like bing bang.
It's just a conference call.
We got you sort of connected down there.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's impressive. And let me just sort of dig into a little bit more, which is, do you guys then follow that through to the outcome? Is it more like, here's some information, good luck, or in Spanish speak, vaya con Dios, whatever, like what's the execution from that point forward?
So another good question. So in this instance, this is really the start of hopefully a long-term relationship with this particular company and with this company's journey in the Chilean market in this instance. So this company may come back to us and say, hey, we'd like for you to do your full service. We have a due diligence background check report that we can do on foreign companies. So they may come back to us and ask us to do a more thorough investigation of this company, where we'll get financial information if that's available. We'll go out and interview the company. We'll interview their current customers, and we provide that information to the U.S. company so that they can do their own vetting on the firm with just that much more information at the back end.
That's a lot of lift.
It's part of why you pay your taxes and part of why the U.S. businesses pay their taxes, Ari.
Is to get that value. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So let me just big picture again, and then I want to maybe go to some more examples. So when you're thinking, Melissa, about your KPIs, like the metrics by which you're measuring success from your team, what does that look like?
So we are funded by Congress, obviously, and we continue to get funding by showing that our assistance actually is helping companies to get what we call wins or export successes. So is our assistance to companies helping them to make more sales internationally? Is it helping them to win foreign procurements? Is it helping them to sign partner agreements with international companies? Are we drumming up more foreign direct investment, which is part of what the U.S. Commercial Service does as well? So we absolutely do, to follow up on an earlier question that you had, we absolutely do follow up with our companies to say, hey, was this assistance helpful? Did you actually make the sale? Is there something else that we can do? Things along those lines. So we absolutely do track that.
Your number one key performance indicator is, did we generate additional revenue through successful export contracts?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if the company is willing to divulge, what does that increased revenue mean in terms of additional jobs at the company?
So is that so it's not just dollars, you also want to report back on, hey, we did X billions of dollars and Y jobs were generated as a result of that extra thing. Exactly. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. You said something that I want to touch on before we get back to sort of the export stuff, which is foreign direct investment. So I made a note that I think I think sort of you told us pre-show that 95% of what you guys do is help generate exports. So that other 5% is direct foreign investment. So
we have a Select USA unit out of our DC headquarters, and 100% of their time is focused on the foreign direct investment side of things. So they have folks around the world as well.
That's not in your kind of bailiwick.
So I do some work with, if you're familiar with the Advanced CT group that's part of DECD, separate from DECD, but works hand in hand with them. So I do work with them if they are looking to do what we call our single location promotion. So if Connecticut is looking to talk to an audience of potential investors in Japan or in Israel or in Brazil, I will get involved to help coordinate with our overseas offices.
So you're, once again, sort of providing that assistance, that connection. So if Advanced CT, which for anyone that doesn't know is a group that sort of, I think, is it funded from DECD?
Partially, yes.
Partially,
yes.
And their real job is to go out and recruit businesses and, retain businesses, but also find new businesses to come into the state, both local and foreign businesses. And so they would contact you and you would help sort of similarly in the same way as the export, kind of in reverse. And how much of what you guys do is manufacturing versus other items?
Good question. In Connecticut, it's mostly manufacturing, but we do some work with attracting foreign students to come to Connecticut's educational institutions. We do work with service providers, so if it's an engineering company, software providers, but by and large, most of the work that we do is with manufacturing companies.
And do you guys get into some of the more small and mid-sized manufacturers? I mean, you had mentioned aerospace and defense, and everyone's familiar with the Sikorskys and the Pratt and Whitneys, and probably can imagine who some of these fuel cell companies are, quite large. But what do you guys do with sort of, if I'm a 50-person, 100-person manufacturer, and I'm like, maybe my wares could go internationally, do you work with them?
So that's actually the sweet spot of the type of companies that we work with. 98% 8% of the work that we do out of the Connecticut office is small to medium-sized companies. So while we wouldn't say no to a Pratt & Whitney or an Electric Boat or a Sikorsky, we're mostly working with their supply chain companies, so mostly small to medium-sized businesses. And I'll mention that the Secretary of Commerce, Gina Raimondo, friend from the great state of Rhode Island, has set a goal for the U.S. Commercial Service and the International Trade Administration to double the number of small to medium-sized businesses that we assist by the end of 2023, with some specific targets for the underserved business community. So minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses, and rural businesses.
What do you think are some of the misconceptions, either to the level of difficulty or to the other side, where people think it's going to be too easy to do the exports? Like, I don't know, just maybe talk through that. And what are some of the common misconceptions that manufacturers, small and medium-sized manufacturers, have about exporting?
Great question. Probably the biggest misconception is that, well, my company's too small to do the exporting. And that's part of the reason that my agency exists, is to help those small to medium-sized companies to successfully execute their export plan. Sometimes companies come to us and they haven't fully done their homework, so we have to sometimes bring it back and help them out in that way.
But when you say haven't done their homework, what does that mean?
So what are if I'm looking to sell a medical device to Germany, there may be there generally are EU regulations that my company needs to meet before I can legally sell that product. What are, in the aerospace defense world and in other sectors as well, there are U.S. export regulations that a company needs to meet before they sell specific high technology products to specific markets and end users. So having an understanding of those type of nuances, which is part of our day-to-day education of companies. Trade finance options. So if you're in Brazil and I'm looking to sell you a product, do I just send it to you on open account? Well, that puts me in a pretty risky spot. So we help to educate companies on how they can do that, how they can protect
We still have the Import-Export Bank?
We still have the XM Bank, yes.
Bank, right.
Rich Foy, who is based in Long Island, covers the Northeast. Great guy, and he works very closely with Connecticut companies. The Small Business Administration is also involved in trade finance.
Okay. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because I know the XM Bank had some issues, and there were some ideas of budget cutting it, because I don't think people fully appreciate how the XM Bank actually works and why it's so important to U.S. business. Maybe you could talk about that?
So on the trade finance side, and I'll defer to my colleagues at XM and SBA who can talk more fluently on the trade finance side, but it is an important factor for companies to consider, whether it's export credit insurance. And XM Bank and SBA will work with a company's bank to guarantee up to 95% of the company's foreign receivables.
Yeah,
that's a big deal.
That's a big deal. Yeah, no, I think that's why I think we should talk about that, because I think people don't always appreciate that. Yes, maybe people do or don't. Maybe they don't know the regulations, but as soon as you say it, they're like, oh yeah, that makes a ton of sense. We have regulations. Europe probably has more than we do. Different people have, even if they're not more or less, they're just different. So there's that component. But I don't know if people start thinking about, oh, wait a minute, I have credit risk, and I don't have the same legal recourse to get collections from a company in Santiago or Sao Paulo or wherever, right? Exactly. Germany, Africa, what have you. There's that piece. And then I also wonder about exchange rate risk. So if I negotiate a deal with somebody in Brazil and then they start hitting some massive inflation, do I have properly set up my contracts to offset for that? Because if I have a fixed price, especially if there's some type of an LTA or some long-term delivery, I could either see potentially margins increasing if the dollar weakens or eroding if the dollar strengthens. So I don't know if I'm going down a road that makes sense or not.
No, absolutely. And we've done a fair number of programs on foreign exchange risk, certainly bringing in our partners with XM and SBA to talk about trade finance. Back in October for Manufacturing Month, my office put together about 10 different export-related virtual webinars to talk about all sorts of things that are relevant for the manufacturing community on the topic of exports. One of them I think you had Bauer on.
I did, Mark
as a
Auletta. Guest.
Yep, so we had Lou Auletta, the Bauer president, on with his bank, Santander, as well as with XM Bank. And really, it was an open conversation about how a small to medium-sized company worked with both SBA, with some of their loan guarantee programs, working in tandem with their bank, and what that looked like for their export process. So I think hearing it from that perspective, from a company perspective, is always something I think that resonates well with other manufacturers. So we try to bring on manufacturers as often as possible to talk about their experiences. Even me, when I'm singing the praises of the U.S. Commercial Service, it's one thing for a U.S. government person to do that. It's another thing to hear words of praise from a manufacturer who's used our services. So I always try to, and we as an agency, as much as possible, try to get some positive quotes from clients that we can share externally.
And Bauer's another, good size, but only 100 employees, give or take. So, good size manufacturer. Do you have any other, maybe to help illustrate the point? I maybe have some other specific examples of successes that maybe you could share with the audience.
Sure, and I'll start with a caveat if that's okay, Ari.
Yeah.
Because some of your listening audience may be listening to this and saying, well, okay, if I start working with the U.S. Commercial Service, will they just start talking about, my specific business? The answer is no. Everything we do is business confidential. But again, going back to metrics, when we follow up with a company, one of the questions we ask is, was our assistance helpful in making an export sale? And can we publicly disclose this? Some companies want everything confidential. Other companies want us to talk about what their successes were. They see it as a good value proposition.
Sure, free marketing. You know what I mean?
So, but we
Gotcha.
Absolutely respect the company's wishes.
Yes, and we also discussed pre-show. I didn't ask you to give.
Sure,
you don't have to give away. We're going to protect the name. They're going to keep the names private to protect.
Well, this name actually I will mention because I talked to the CEO and he said yes, absolutely, and he said tell Ari I said hi. So Boris Levin.
Oh, nice.
From Mott Corporation. There's a press release that I'll share with you as well. So, which is great.
Boris was also another podcast guest. So anyone?
Yeah, his podcast was great. I just listened to it the other day. He has a fascinating story. So Boris approached our office a couple years back, and as you know, Mott Corporation is about a 200-person employee-owned company, and they're involved in a variety of different sectors. Really interesting company. They had a potential, like a $10 million potential deal with Pemex, which is a Mexican government-owned entity in the refinery business. The issue they were having is communications just stopped with Pemex. It was radio silence, and they couldn't get in touch with some of the decision makers, and they had this potential deal pending and a couple things, technical things that they needed to have worked out. So Boris approached us to see what we could do, and our office took, I'll call it a two-pronged approach. So we worked with my office at the U.S. Embassy in Mexico City with our energy specialist, who happens to know Pemex quite well, explained what the situation was, and my counterpart in Mexico City was able to sit down with Boris and say, okay, Boris, here's how Pemex operates. You don't want to be talking to this person. You need to be talking to this person over here. And here's the strategy for how you further ingratiate yourself and continue the conversation. While that was going on, my former director was working with the lieutenant governor, as well as we were able to get in with the consul general, the Mexican consul general out of New York City, to help to advocate on Mott's behalf to Pemex. So through, several weeks later, through those two mechanisms, we were able to get Boris and his team at Mott back in touch with Pemex. They were able to work out whatever technical issues they were having, and eventually down the road, they were able to get the $10 million contract, which for a 200-person company is a huge deal.
It's a very big deal. Very, very big
huge deal. Yeah. Huge deal. And hopefully will lead to future, work with that company and with other companies. So that's the kind of work that we do on a day-to-day basis. Another example is a large aerospace company I'll say a medium-sized aerospace company in the state approached me a couple summers ago. They were doing business in the UK, but they really needed more boots on the ground in the rest of Western Europe, Eastern Europe as well. So I worked with our aerospace defense specialists across Europe to work with this company to say, okay, this is what the company is looking to do. This is the type of local partner that they want. So let's help them define, okay, based on what you're looking to do, you really need someone in Poland versus in Romania, or in France versus in Germany, or whatnot. So we first started by defining that. And then we dug in, and my counterparts in Europe reached out to potential partners of this Connecticut company introduce the Connecticut company and their technical capabilities, and set up one-on-one meetings for the Connecticut company to basically interview these potential representative firms in these various countries. So as a result of all of that work, the Connecticut company hired, I think, 3 to 5 representatives in Western and Eastern Europe, and is looking forward to making more sales and increasing jobs at their company in Connecticut. So that's the kind of work that I and my colleagues are doing every day. So it's always fun. It's always something new and fascinating.
Yeah, it does seem actually super interesting.
And I get to meet, and you've met a lot of great companies across the state. You know that Connecticut is a gem.
It is a gem.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's go into, I think we've done a lot sort of covering sort of what you guys do. How do you engage with the businesses? I mean, are you guys doing sort of webinars? How do you educate? Do you visit people? Like, how does this work?
In a pre-COVID world, and hopefully COVID will be in the rear view soon enough, we absolutely visit companies. So, for me, it's interesting. I talked about my father's tool and die work at a manufacturing company in Waterbury. It is so vastly different to see the companies now. I mean, we talk about how manufacturing has changed. It's amazing to see the advanced manufacturing that's being done across the state, and to see the facilities. It really is incredible. So we do a ton of education. We have our national field director recently said there's something like 300 some odd webinars that are in the queue for all of our offices across the U.S. over the next several months. So we're constantly doing education for the exporting community.
How do people find out about these? Are you guys doing sort of like email blasts? Are you partnering with some of the manufacturing associations? Like, how do people find out about this stuff?
Great question. Both. We do a lot of email marketing. We've got a great list of companies that we've worked with across the state, but we also do partner. Earlier, I was chatting with Sarah about Manufacture CT and Jamie Scott and his organization. So we work with organizations like his, with Jessica Taylor at the Aerospace Component Manufacturers Group, with CBIA, with other organizations like that, with chambers across the state. So a lot of local partners. Partners are absolutely critical for a three-person operation. We also have there are organizations called District Export Councils that work very closely with our offices across the country. So the Connecticut District Export Council is made up of half manufacturing leaders in the state and also business leaders, so lawyers, accountants, trade finance experts. And they really work to help and augment the work that we do.
And are those like private partner?
So all of the members of the District Export Councils are appointed by the Secretary of Commerce.
Okay.
So it's a
federal employees?
They are not federal employees. They are all manufacturing companies and private individuals. The DECs themselves are a private, not-for-profit organization, but they work closely in tandem with the U.S. Commercial Service. So they are a critical partner for us. So if I need to we recently did a program on cybersecurity, or if we're doing something on supply chain, I'll often call on some of my DEC members who have expertise in these areas, and they'll come on and speak on our webinars.
Oh, gotcha.
So we're absolutely, it's critical that we tap into the local ecosystem. And that's the other reason that we have 106 offices across the United States, is to tap into those local ecosystems.
Yeah. Do you guys, well, just really quickly before I ask you the next question, if someone wants to proactively kind of look what you guys are doing, is there a website they go to? Do they just call your personal cell phone?
You can call my cell. My cell is always on. Well, except for now, my cell is not on. But other than now, my cell is always on. So trade.gov is our main website. They can find their local office. Again, my office covers the entire state of Connecticut. Hopefully your listening audience is across the U.S. or getting across the U.S., but we do have offices, if a company's in California or Texas or in Idaho.
Trade.gov.
Trade.gov.
Do you guys also help companies that want to open up like branches overseas as well, or is that really not part of the deal?
That's not directly in line with the export mandate, but if a company does contact us for that, we can get them in touch with, for instance, if they're looking to do something in the UK Trade and Investment Office or Department of International Trade can help them to do that. So we can get them.
Or maybe acquire a foreign business or something like that. Right?
To acquire a foreign business depends on how. That could be a nuanced conversation. So it depends on exactly what the company's looking to do. But we could always, my generalist statement is always, if you've got an international export question, call me. I may not have the answer, but I can generally get you to the right person.
You know who the right person to get to
exactly.
is. So I know we're kind of out of time. I just wanted to ask a couple more questions. Like, for example, if I'm a small business, what should I be thinking is true, or what should I check off my list before I contact you to make my time with you and your time with me most effective?
It's a good question. I would say understand your business inside and out, and understand your company's and your company's product's unique value proposition, because that's something that we always talk about as we're introducing companies to our office in Brazil, our office in Taiwan, our office in Italy, whatever the case may be. So really having a good understanding of what your product is, who your competitors are, and we can help you on the international side. But having that is helpful on the internet with the initial conversation, and also understanding. One of the questions I'll ask companies is, well, how have you been successful in the U.S.? What does your supply chain look like? What does your, customer stream look like? Really having your arms around that is helpful.
Are there any particular products that you think we should be exporting more of? And like, if someone's listening and you make that and you're not exporting, you should be calling us because that should be exporting. Is there anything like that? I know it's a broad question, but I just didn't know if there was anything.
So it's a great question.
By the way, you've mentioned fuel cell, you mentioned aerospace test stands,
medical,
and you mentioned medical,
devices.
And Matt does other stuff besides medical too, with oil and gas, whatever.
Yep.
So we've covered. The reason I wanted to make sure I bring that up is everyone. I think there's like this idea out there that all they care about is jet engines or whatever. But I think you've made the point earlier, and I'll just make it more finely now, that you're probably not that involved in actually the export of jet engines because they've got their own people.
Correct.
It's really the supply chain folks who could do more. It's just an important point, so that's why I was just wondering.
That's absolutely right. And to that point, I'll mention that we work with any and all industries. There's a couple areas that by law we're not allowed to help export. So
firearms.
So actually, alcohol, we can do wine and beer, yes, but hard alcohol is a no. Tobacco and pornography. Those are the three areas that are a hard stop.
No.
A hard no.
Okay.
Basically anything else, as long as it's 51% or more U.S. content, because we're taxpayer funded, we can work with. So we have industry sector teams with the U.S. Commercial Service that cover everything: advanced manufacturing, aerospace defense, energy, environmental tech solutions, healthcare technologies.
When you say 51% U.S. made or whatever, I don't think this is a big deal, but just define it real quick.
So, and we would work with a company directly to look at where are the products coming in. What we're looking to avoid is, I'm a one-person company. I'm importing 100% from name your country, not doing it, not adding any value, and then just shipping it back out. Again,
Right.
because my organization's job is about jobs, we want to grow jobs,
right.
and that's really through the manufacturing process.
Gotcha.
So
just
most companies know
value add. Yeah, they know what they're talking about.
It's
and most of the
51% or
SMBs
not.
we're talking about here probably don't fall into that issue.
Yep.
And then just one last thing before we go to rapid fire. Do you guys have any involvement in workforce development specifically? It's a big issue with manufacturers right now. You had talked about one of your missions is to bring students in to our educational institutions here, which is an indirect workforce development effort. But is there anything sort of overtly workforce development that you guys do?
Not in terms of our direct mandates, although I will say if you ever have the Secretary of Commerce on, I think the Department of Commerce is absolutely, that is one of the things that the administration and the Secretary of Commerce is looking at for sure.
Okay, but nothing in your guys specifically?
Nothing in although it is one of those things, what keeps you up at night? You do, everyone in Connecticut is talking about supply chain and workforce development, so it is one of those things that is constantly on my mind.
On your mind.
So, yeah, absolutely.
All right, cool.
Absolutely.
All right, Melissa, are you ready to do some rapid fire? All right, here we go. Red Sox or Yankees?
Yankees. And that's dangerous because my boss is in Boston, so that's put me in a bad spot.
Also dangerous because the person across the table from you doesn't like the Yankees, but that's all right.
I apologize.
That's all right. We got plenty of distance between us. Starbucks or Dunkin'?
Dunkin'.
Staycation or exotic destination?
Have passport, will travel.
There you go.
Yeah.
iPhone or Android?
iPhone.
Sports car or SUV?
I think we'll go SUV.
Do you have a favorite business book?
I'm just finishing up Dare to Lead with Dr. Brene Brown, which has been great.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
If you had to do something other than be the director of the U.S. Commercial Service, and it could be anything in the whole wide world, what would you do?
I'm going to say something involved with if you've seen the Apple show, the Apple TV show, Ted Lasso, something in writer, production, crew something. I just love that show. It's great.
Okay, work for the Ted Lasso show.
Yeah.
Okay, not be a football coach in.
No.
It was the show itself,
Just
not
the
what's
show
happening
itself.
in the show.
Nothing with
Got it. Nothing.
football.
Got it.
Yeah.
Melissa, what's something that you learned early in your life or early in your career that you think's helped propel you to all the success that you've had?
I think certainly for my family, strong work ethic and being a person of integrity.
Oh, that's good. What's something that you learned later in your life or later in your career that if you went back and told young Melissa and she'd listened to you, you think it'd really help propel her?
That as long as you are taking a lesson from your failures, the failures can actually springboard you to great success.
No such thing as failure if you learn from it. There we
100%.
go. Melissa, thank you so much for coming on today. And thank you so much for what you do to support Connecticut manufacturers. Exporting is a huge part of what we do, and the more we can do, the better we are. So thank you.
Thanks, Ari.
Made in America with Ari Santiago is brought to you by CompassMSP.
Thanks for listening and spending some time with me today. My goal is to help build a strong manufacturing community, and it would be impossible to do without all of you.